Good morning, everyone. Carlos Cedillo here. This will be part 2 of my book reading of the Ukraine-Russian-Ezekiel 38 war. In my last video, I explained that we are a hair's breadth away from a nuclear war between Russia, Ukraine, NATO, and the US. And the cost being that Ukraine has threatened to shoot Storm Shadow missiles deep into Russian territory. And remember that in the Ezekiel 38 narrative, Gog is the ancient leader of Russia, and Magog is the ancient name of the territory of Russia. If you missed this first video, you might benefit in your understanding if you go back and read part 1. So, moving on, I'll start with part 2 of Ukraine-Russian-Ezekiel 38 war. I'll begin the reading in episode 2 with the subtitle, God Prompts Gog to Attack Israel. But before I begin, let me add a couple of points that could give clarity to this reading. In this part of the Ezekiel prophecy, God influences the Russian leader, Gog, in provoking him to leave his quarters in the north and go and attack Israel. And this would seem to be out of sync with the present situation where Russia is at war with Ukraine and not Israel, at least not yet. However, the present conflict between Iran and Israel could begin to turn Russia against Israel. At the recent Russian-Iran summit, Russia warned, in parentheses, Israel, against attacking Iran. And interesting to know that Russia has also started fuel exports to Iran, who has been running low on missile fuel. American economist and public policy analyst Jeffrey Sachs says that Iran is an ally of Russia, and if they're being pummeled by the U.S.-Israeli combination of forces, then he thinks Russia would become involved, and the U.S. would have a two-front war with Russia. And Russia would also be involved in a two-front war with Israel and Ukraine. Okay. And this would fulfill the Ezekiel 38 prophecy where Gog, the leader of Russia, would come from the north to attack Israel. And interestingly enough, Persia, which is Iran, also joins Russia in the attack, along with Libya and Sudan. So now I will begin reading portions of this book, beginning on episode 2. And let's go there. So remember, we're just reading portions of the book, we're not reading the whole thing. But you can get a copy of this book on Amazon. And I'll go to a subtitle called God Prompts Gog to Attack Israel. In Ezekiel 38, God lays out a divine strategy for Gog, that's G-O-G, Gog, in which he wants him to leave his quarters in the north and go and attack Israel. However, this does not appeal to him, and he decides to go a different route. But whoa, Gog, not so fast, God says. I'll turn you back and put hooks into your jaws, and I will bring you forth with your armies and warriors, all suited up in battle gear. So apparently Gog is not completely independent. He's got all this inner conflict going on, not knowing that it's God who's working on his mind and hardening his heart against Israel. Ezekiel 38:15 through 17. This is much like when God hardened the heart of Pharaoh of Egypt against Moses and the Hebrew people. Exodus 9:12. Now, why would God want Gog to attack Israel? Was not Israel God's favorite group of people in the Old Testament times? Yes, they were. But they began to go astray way back in the time of Ezekiel the prophet. They started going after other gods and rejecting God's laws. And God explains this backsliding of Israel in Ezekiel 39, 23, and 24. But God is merciful, and when he sees Israel being ravished by Gog and his soldiers, he is furious, and he remembers his covenant of loving kindness and mercy towards Israel, and the tables are turned against Gog. Isaiah 54, 8 and 10. God sends a mighty earthquake that shakes the whole world, and he rains down great hailstones, fire, and brimstone against Gog and his armies. Ezekiel 18:23. Okay, now I will go to page 20. Let's see, I go to another episode. Done. Let me flip over to that. And we'll start right here. Question. In the end time story of Ezekiel 38 and Revelation 19, is God's objective to rescue Israel or to war against Gog in the Battle of Armageddon? Answer. God is getting two birds with one stone. He's coming to rescue his backslidden woman Israel from the northern invader Gog, and at the same time, he annihilates Gog and his armies in the valley of Megiddo. It's imperative that God destroys Gog in order that he may bring forth the 1,000 years of peace where there will no longer be any wars. This era is known as the millennium. Question. Why do I need to know all these things about this Ukraine war that's halfway around the world? It's quite intense and complicated. Can't I just go home and have a quiet dinner and watch a movie or something? Answer. Don't you want to know what's behind this war? What it means for you, how it's going to end, and what will be the final outcome for our world? Question. Well, what could it possibly mean for me? Answer. It means that you are very close to Jesus' second return. And if you believe in him and you go up to be with him, you'll also be getting married. Question. Me married? To whom? What's your name? Tricia. Answer. Tricia, you'll be getting married to the Son of God, to Jesus, the bridegroom. Tricia. Wait. Me get married to God? I don't even know he wants to be with me, much less marry me. Answer. It's not a question of whether God wants to be with you. That's a given. The question is, do you want to be with him? Tricia. Well, yes, I would like to be with him, but how do I do that? Answer. All you have to do is believe. Believe in God and believe in his Son, Jesus. Okay, is that all? What if what? Tricia. Well, I don't know if he'd want me. I've done some pretty awful things. I feel kind of dirty. Answer. No worries. That's why God gave us his Son on the Calvary cross. That was an atoning sacrifice. And if you believe this and ask his forgiveness for whatever awful things you've done, then you're going to live forever, and you will be his bride. Tricia. Wow, that sounds so good. Is this a fairy tale like the Cinderella story? Answer. Absolutely not. This is for real. As a matter of fact, I'm going to hold back on the next episode, which is about the Battle of Armageddon. Instead, I'm going to give you a repeat on what I said about the grand wedding in my last book, The Pandemic Gospel. This will help you to envision what's in store for you. Enjoy. Note, I know it's easy for women to relate to these passages about marriage to God, but not so easy to comprehend if you're a man. And being a man, I understand this dilemma perfectly well. However, I believe that in God's supernatural and loving ways, we will all be glorified as God's brides. And perhaps the following verse reveals the mystery to this holy conundrum, and considering that there is a female within the Trinitarian Godhead. Genesis 1:27. For as a woman marries a virgin, so shall your sons marry you. And as the bridegroom rejoices over the bride, so shall your God rejoice over you. Isaiah 62:5. Okay, we continue reading here. We'll go to episode 5. So remember, we're not reading the whole thing, we're just reading portions. But if you want the whole enchilada, you can go and purchase this book on Amazon. This title is called The Grand Wedding. Let us be glad and rejoice and give him glory, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his wife had made herself ready. Revelation 19:7. Something is hauntingly beautiful about Celine Dion's song, Love Can Touch Us One Time and Last for a Lifetime. The theme song from the Titanic. The something is magical, even transcendent, and embodied in our desire for romantic love. This is portrayed in Hollywood films when a lonely soul blissfully discovers the love of his life, and they consummate their joy in marriage. We've all, to some extent or another, experienced this evocative quest for love, but now we stagger at the realization that we were created by a God who loves and seeks intimate relationship with us. This great God of the universe, he humbles himself as he bows to propose to us, then raptures us high into the heavenlies for the grandest wedding of all times. Oh my God, are you going to propose to me? I will betroth you to me forever in loving devotion and compassion, and you shall know the Lord. Hosea 2:20. This God who comes to rescue you has more in mind than just a rescue mission. He loves you more than you realize. He wants to marry you. Well, I'm flattered, but I'm just a commoner on this planet. Why would the Prince of Heaven want to marry me? Oh, he had his eye on you from before you were born. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. Jeremiah 1:5. Even in the garden, after you disregarded his request to not eat of the forbidden fruit, you went and hid yourself behind the bushes, and still he came looking for you. Where are you? Come back to me. God has a heart, and he seeks intimacy with us. We're the woman he desired from the beginning, even until now. It's illustrated in Revelation 12. And if we're honest with ourselves, we have always had a deep longing in our soul for someone to love us, to cherish us, and take us into their arms and tell us they love us, and who would be with us forever and ever. And now, in this episode and other writings, we're realizing this lover has found us, and he's coming for us. We just didn't know this person would be deity, the God of the universe. Another subtitle, A Marriage Made in Heaven, literally. So here we are, at the end of the tribulation plot. You may also realize that there is a specific series of events that compose the Revelation story. In episode 1, I painted the picture of the second coming of the Son of God, as he came in the clouds with power and the sound of trumpets. It's at this time when he takes us up to be with him that our wedding feast will be held in the great ballroom of God's kingdom. Question. Okay, so you're saying the King of Kings loves me and wants to marry me? This is wild. And I'd like to get some clarity about this wedding. It's going to be symbolic, right? Like a metaphor? It's not like a real wedding, is it? Answer. Of course it's going to be a real wedding. For goodness sake, he, this wonderful God, invented that beautiful, loving union between a man and a woman called marriage. Do you think that now, when it comes to his own holy matrimony between himself and his bride, do you think he's going to give us a scaled down, watered down, sanitized version of the real thing. Think of the incredible splendor, love, and beauty of weddings you've seen in your life or in the movies. Now multiply those 1,000,000 times, and you're still not going to be close to the majesty and grandeur of what your wedding in heaven is going to be like. But the kind of relationship you want with God is up to you. Some will just want to be his friend, and that's fine too. Another subtitle, Here Comes the Bride. All the billions of people who have throughout time believed in God composed the body of the heavenly bride, even his lost children who are yet and destined to find him and know him. And being omnipresent, he, God, can enjoy each one of his brides in a one-on-one relationship. Everybody quiet now. The bride is ready to walk the aisle. A special guest, Eric Carmen, is singing a song requested by the bride, I Was Born to Love You. The bride, adorned in a pure white dress, is walking slowly, gracefully through the aisle. Her face is radiant with joy and beauty, and her adoring gaze is on the Son of God who waits for her. Now the bride takes her place next to the bridegroom, and God the Father is facing them, ready to unite them in holy matrimony. Okay, we'll stop there, and we'll continue in part 3 next time. So don't go away, stay tuned.